Welcome to the Crime Redefined podcast, produced by Zero Cliff Media. Coming to you from the US Bank Tower, high above downtown Los Angeles. In our podcast, we drill deep into forensics and criminal investigation from the viewpoint of the defense, as well as explore the intersection of the media and the justice system.
Hey, Crime Redefined fans. We hope you enjoyed part one of our interview with Mark McLaughlin. Now we present part two of this interesting interview with a very talented digital forensics expert. At the end of the interview, Deanna and I will give our closing comments as usual. Please enjoy.
You know, that makes me think have you seen, or obviously because you're doing this, every day, but have you seen a noticeable change in law enforcement that, if there's a crime, we'll call it old school crime, like on the sidewalk, someone is killed or something happens, correct? And then they secure the crime scene. Are the police now, the knee-jerk thing to do, the first step now, are they securing digital crime scenes? Is that moved like as a top priority? Like the first thing that they do now is like what you just said, like you say that they may already know the information on his phone before they actually physically have it in their hands. Is that part of like a new way of doing business for law enforcement? They just, boom, let's secure the digital crime scene before things can go away.
Yeah, I would say generally yes, but a lot of it has to do, Dion, with the expertise of the investigator. In Los Angeles, there's a lot of activity going on. I mean, it's the largest court system in the world. Mayhill and I are pretty busy on our cases. There's a lot happening here in LA. So we go over this over and over and over again. In other jurisdictions, not so much. And so they may get one murder every couple years, 2-3 years. So how do they know how to investigate that murder effectively, or a shooting? And what's the expertise of this investigator? How many have they investigated? I looked at the search warrant, or it was either a search warrant or the report for this investigator out of the Rust case. And I think he had like 4 years on the job, 3 or 4 years. That's not a lot of experience at all.
So somewhere like in New Mexico, where they don't see, too much of this, it may not be, like the go-to thing, but like obviously in metropolitan areas, that's might be closer to step one.
Yeah, and there's still, even in the metropolitan areas where, we've got a case right now where a detective didn't really understand cell tower records, and he pinned this case on our client. He wasn't even there. He misread the records and the information. He wasn't even at the location. That case is pending a dismissal here shortly, knock on wood, that it's going to continue and get dismissed. But yeah, it happens a lot where people just don't do a solid investigation because they don't understand it. It's not generally taught in school. In law school, I can tell you that when I went through law school, they don't tell you about electronic evidence. They don't. Other than I remember one paragraph in one law book. That was it. That's all we had on electronic evidence. So the law is really slow at coming around. But back to the investigation side, if you're talking about a hot investigation, Dion, like a murder situation, a street crime, where you'd block it off and tape it off, you collect the physical evidence. You might assign somebody if you believe maybe it's a gang related crime, and the gangs that are involved. Go start pulling information associated with these individuals involved with the gang, and see if we can pop something that makes sense. If they're posting, because that happens a lot.
Digitally pin them to the location.
Well, to physically the location, that's one area, or they're talking about it. And if they're talking about it, that means they have some knowledge. Where they get the knowledge from? Were they there?
Right.
Somebody else? You just don't know. And so they start to build these profiles. A lot of investigators are just learning about this. If you're talking about specialized units, LAPD robbery homicide, FBI, sheriff's homicide, they work with this all the time, and they're really good at what they do. But smaller units, divisional detectives, not so much. Smaller departments, not so much. And it also depends on the amount of expertise they've got to put the warrants together, or even their interest in doing it. Yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't think I need it. It's like discounting it is not necessary. Typically, law enforcement will get everything they need to make their case, and that's it. We're not going to get any exculpatory information. We don't need that because we got everything that puts the individual there, and he's good for the case, good for the crime. Look, sometimes people get lazy and they just don't want to do it. They think they got enough and that's it, and we're just moving on. And sometimes you'll see with the DAs, they'll let things slide. And all of a sudden we get involved in it and it's like, they know, then they start scrambling because they're trying to save their case when they know they have a lot of problems, which they could have identified at the outset by doing a solid investigation, or the filing DA that gets the criminal filing says, wait a minute, something's wrong here. What about, in this one case I just mentioned that hopefully is going to get dismissed here shortly, the cell tower hit was next to the incident location. That's right. Except the cell tower hit was pointing away from the incident location, and it was 3 hours before. So do you think that makes sense? It makes sense. It's a problem that we pointed out to them, and that's why we believe the case is going to get dismissed here shortly. But and I've had several of those in my career. This would be the sixth one that gets dismissed if it goes down, and we found, and that just doesn't happen in the criminal area. I know Mehul, you'll agree to this, that you don't get a lot of criminal dismissals. It just doesn't happen. You'll get a plea, and they'll do something, but they don't want to dismiss the case once they file it. They do not want to do that.
Yeah, they got to stick to their guns for sure.
Right, that's right. And if you have a victim who's very well connected or vociferous and wants to make it an issue and make them look bad, that'll happen too. So cops don't want to look bad. Law enforcement, prosecutors, they don't want to look bad.
Well, Mark, to follow up on that point,
yeah.
How often do you see law enforcement inadvertently or otherwise failing to preserve digital evidence that could be helpful to a defendant?
I used to see it a lot more years ago, not so much now. If they're involved with it, they pretty much got it. And a lot of the cases we're working are, I don't say high profile cases, which we work on a lot of those too, but in murder cases and street crime cases, things that make the news, they're pretty good at doing preservation. For something that's happening around the corner that's not really a high profile thing, it's possible that they're just going to not even take a look at it because they don't think it's relevant, or they just don't know that it's relevant. Based on their limited expertise when working with these things. Just because you're a detective doesn't mean you know everything about your job. It just doesn't. And a lot of it has to do with experience and what the detective's experience is. If they worked other assignments before they got into this detective role. So is it possible that things are missed? Yeah. But not so much. Not so much anymore.
You mentioned this already. Have you seen a new mentality within law enforcement about maybe coming up with an actual digital forensics, internal digital forensics on their team? Does something that's an actual carve out, a unit within itself, or is that rolled up just into the different departments already?
Right. So larger departments have a unit that handles digital evidence. And if you're like LAPD has several different subsections. They have one that just does phones. They have one that does video only, one that does computers. There's one involved in a specialized area for ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children, for child pornography cases. That's all they work. They're really good at that. And so they work really well, and they understand these CP cases, child pornography cases well. So larger departments have that. Smaller departments might have maybe one forensic examiner there. He may be doing, or she may be doing multiple wearing up multiple hats and doing other stuff. or they may have a half person doing it, or they may farm it out to somebody else, to a larger organization. What I've always said was that you need to get what we're doing, at least from an evidence collection standpoint, down to the lowest level, which means you got to train these street cops of how to collect this information and the CSI. It's not difficult to do. It just isn't. But it's a different mindset for law enforcement. That's not what they've done.
Right.
And so they've got to kind of re-gear their thinking for doing that. And plus, there's an expense associated with it. So when it comes down to money, sometimes things don't happen, right? But I know that's something that organizations are doing more of now, at least in letting their detectives do certain things. There's a regional computer forensic lab in Orange County, and sometimes detectives will go directly to the lab, and they have a little kiosk there, which is like a Cellebrite acquisition kiosk, and you can plug the phone in and acquire the information there. The problem with that is that with mobile devices, sometimes there's 3 types of acquisitions you can do, and they increase with the granularity with the type of acquisition you're doing. So there's a logical file system, and there's a physical. Logical is just everything that's active on the device. If they just plug it in and do that one, you may not get email, which you would get on the file system. You may not get more deleted information, which you get on the file system and the physical. But because they don't know about it, they're just capturing it. So that's what I tell. Even I was out at LAPD a couple of days ago working on a case, and I was kind of schooling this detective on what he should be doing. He was a real nice guy, so I was helping him out, and I'm saying, look, this is what you should be doing when you're collecting this information and why you should do it. Meaning that you need to do the most comprehensive acquisition you can get. Generally, we get 1 bite at it. That's it. And so you got to make sure that when you get that 1 bite at this device, that you do a good job with it. And so that's the whole intent for making a complete acquisition.
A lot of what you're saying kind of leads me to my next question, which I can see the impact, but tell us why it was important for you to go to law school, and then what the carryover impact has been on your skills as a digital forensics and police practices expert.
Yeah. It's really helped out. It took me, because I had an investigator mindset when I got into law school, and it took me 1.5 years to change that. It took amount of time. I mean, every day they beat you over the head with, this is what you got to think like a lawyer, think like a lawyer, think like a lawyer. So what is thinking like a lawyer? Thinking like a lawyer is you have to look at all sides of a case. And that's a difficult thing, a difficult mindset change to make. And it has helped my investigations exponentially because I'm always looking at all the possibilities here and trying to see if we have an issue, and then covering that issue and seeing if I can resolve it before it becomes an issue. And so I'm looking at it from the opposing person's eyes, law enforcement's eyes, from the opposing expert's eyes. How am I going to handle this? Plus, having a knowledge of the law is very important. Amateurs argue the facts. Lawyers argue the elements of an offense. And so the way we work, and we're different than a lot of other experts, is we look at the elements of the offense and we apply the facts to the elements and see if it's there. We don't just handle the facts by themselves and say, here it is. It's a different approach. And because of that, we're able to connect more with our lawyer clients and give them information that they can use and they can run with, because they don't know our expertise, but we understand the law. And so when you put those two together with the electronic evidence and the law, it really dovetails to be a real juggernaut in getting things done. And there's somewhat of a kinship, I guess, when they see the JD behind my name. When I'm talking to a lawyer about a case, it's like, oh yeah, you're one of us. Okay, so okay, so and then you got this connection. So that's helped out a lot.
Well, Mark, I know that sometimes you're appointed by the court to be a neutral expert for both parties. Can you talk about some of your frustrations and difficulties in that scenario, and why it can be so hard to keep both sides happy?
Yeah, in a neutral environment, if you're appointed by the court as a neutral, you're not working for one party or another. So if it's criminal, you're not working for the prosecution or defense. You're working directly for the court. If it's a civil case, you're not working for the plaintiff or the defense. You're working directly for the court. And it's generally involving an issue that the court doesn't believe that either one can do an honest assessment of. And so that's why they would bring me in and work directly for the court to resolve an issue. It's really difficult to do, because when you're not working for one side or the other, then everybody's on you. I mean, everybody. The court's on you. You got to deliver. I need it. I understand, Judge. I got that. And then you've got both sides saying, well, you're not getting enough information that I need, and you're getting too much. Why are you going over it? It's just like, you can't make anybody happy. So it becomes a real challenge. I've done it several times. I've got an existing case right now, existing criminal case, where I'm a neutral. And although the sides are pretty good, pretty well, it still can create some issues, certainly from some of the custodians. But it can be a real challenge, Mehul, in doing the neutral work. It's rough. It's rough, but it's just part of the job. And if you want the case, that's what you take. If you don't want it, then you just don't do it.
So Mark, I'm actually really excited to ask this next question. It's one you're familiar with. As you know, we've been recently covering the disappearance of Terrence Woods Jr. and we were working with his father, and that his father has the laptop and the camera, but his cell phone was with him when he disappeared. So in broad strokes, what are some of the basic investigation steps that can be done regarding digital evidence in this case?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that this occurred, and it's also unfortunate it occurred in an area that's so remote. Remote in having electronic sources around, that's one issue. The second is the investigative expertise of the people involved in the case. As we talked about earlier, I mean, if you don't see a lot of these cases and you don't know about a lot of these techniques, you may be missing some things. And so when I looked at the case, and all I looked at was this article, if I recall, it was a pretty extensive article that you referred me to. There were certain things that I would want to do if I was investigating this. One is, I would look for his Google account, and I would send a geofence warrant to Google to find out. We knew where the guy is at this location at the production site. We knew where he was probably staying, and then you have some I think remote roads that you would see. So you could put those two areas together, or three areas or multiple areas together, and come up with a pretty good idea of where that device would be and track that device. That's very helpful, Google location. Find My Device is another one that Apple has. Call detail records. I want to take a look at the call detail records to see what type of activity was going on at the time with just before and if was there any activity after the incident. Cell tower pings. That's something that you can do as an active approach when you're trying to find somebody. Typically, we'll look at call detail records for historical information, but you can also, through the wireless carrier, do under exigent circumstance, send a request to them, and they will actually ping the phone. And so the cell tower can actually send out a request to the device and see if it finds the device. If it has the device, then it can come up with a generalized location of the device. Is the device moving, or is the device in one location? This and by the way, because we have batteries associated with these things, you got to get on this quick. Is it possible that the device is in an area, but it's just dead because it has no power anymore? That's possible. So those are things that could happen. Social media posts is another. What was going on his social media? I know there was an issue of him being somewhat despondent, or at least people thought so. Is it possible that he took his own life? It sounds really unusual that would occur here based on the facts, but I guess it's possible. And as an investigator, you would want to run that down. I would want to look at the social media posts. Was there despondent posts? Were there posts where he's talking to somebody and saying, I feel bad now, or they're not treating me bad, or whatever it is, something like that, to get a sense of what's his state of mind at the time. Regarding the computer examination, I know there was some thought of that a subsequent examination is going to burn the system down or lock up the system. I don't know what they're talking about with that. That doesn't make sense. And some type of firewall situation. A firewall is related to incoming activity to the device and trying to stop that negative activity, as opposed to like a hacker, as opposed to some firewall. I don't know what they're referring to as a firewall that would be on the device. But in any event, if they're talking about some type of security on the device, that's possible. If there's a passcode, generally we can circumvent passcodes on computers because we come in the back door of that. However, sometimes, not all the time, the hard drive on the computer, the storage device, is married to the board, the motherboard, and it's synced up. So because it's married and synced up, if you take the hard drive out, it's going to show as unavailable information, unallocated clusters, which is like the deleted area of the computer, which means there's nothing there. Which there is something there, but it's secured, so we're not going to show it to you. That's essentially what's happening there on the laptop. And there's also backups you could take a look at too.
Yeah, I think the dad might have kind of was confused about the firewall versus just a password to log into the laptop, because I didn't understand the firewall. That has nothing to do with security as far as like being able to access the laptop itself. So I think he might have been conflating a couple of things. Right. I'm curious, in your background, have you worked a lot of missing person cases?
Not a lot of them. I've worked some of them, but a lot of the information is very similar, Dion, in the approaches that we would take to try to identify where this individual is, who were they talking to, what's their state of mind. That can be very helpful. Generally, those missing persons cases are coming from like a parent, like we have here on the Woods case. And so they could reach out to us, but generally they're hanging with law enforcement, and law enforcement is trying to do their best, but they may not take all these approaches, electronic evidence approaches that are available to them. And that's something that it just comes on your expertise, where you are, how many of these have you handled in the past, and what are the resources you have at your disposal. The department where this occurred is a very small sheriff's department, but it covers a huge geographic area.
Yeah, it's almost like the state of Idaho.
It is. So I mean, it's so large that. How could they have the coverage? How could they have the expertise to do these things that we have in larger metropolitan areas? Well, they don't. Well, they could call in resources. I wasn't sure, based on the reports, if they called in anybody from the state. The state would have much more expertise. Certainly, if they called in the feds have all the expertise.
Yeah, that's a great call, and it's actually a little bit of I hate to use the word indictment on the sheriff department, but you're right. They should have called the state right away so they could bring in, obviously bigger funding, bigger departments. But I want to give you a plug here, because it sounds like like you said, if a family calls you or is missing somebody, they're going to be working with law enforcement. But it sounds like if you do have the resources, someone like you should be the first call, because the phone, like you mentioned before in the smash and grabs, no one, especially any youth, are going to be leaving anywhere without their phone. And so it sounds like that battery in the phone, time is of the essence, correct?
I would agree with you, but I would differ with you in one respect, in that I would call law enforcement first.
No. I'm saying in tandem with that. So you're going to call in the crime and do all that. But depending on unless it's, you have two problems with using in metropolitan areas, they're either going to be too busy, they'll have the resources, but you may be lower in their in the list of them getting to your case. And then if you're in rural, like in Idaho, they may not have the resources. So if you personally have it, obviously do all the law enforcement stuff, but because that battery is so critical, and to be able to do that kind of reverse ping that you were talking about, it sounds like that's some good advice out there, is to call someone with your skill set right away.
Yeah, you could do that. I still think though that, you put a lot of focus on law enforcement and if they think, well, if they think they're doing a good job, they're not going to call anybody else in. And if they think they need help, it takes somebody to think, well, hey, maybe we do need some help here, some outside help here. If you got an ego thing going on at the local agency, that may be a problem.
And Michael's shaking his head and agreeing with that right now.
Yeah.
It could be a problem. But I still think that, could we do something? Yes. The law enforcement has much more power than we do. They have search warrants. And they can get this information quickly. They can access databases quickly. For us, it takes us time to do that. We can eventually get there, but it doesn't happen right away. And if time is of the essence, in your hypothetical there, Dion, then I think stick with law enforcement. And if you're a family member, I would be on their butts. I'd be on their butts all the time. What are you doing? What do you got? What is good?
But you hear that a lot, Mark, like the reluctance. You hear the family pushing law enforcement to do X, Y, or Z. And then it seems like, at least the way it's portrayed in the media, that there's like a reluctance to maybe do something that seems obvious to the family.
Right. Well, the family are not investigators. That's the other thing. So, does it make sense? I think the family should get some consult from someone, whether it's a lawyer that has experience in this or an examiner, somebody that has experience to say, well, what do you think? What do you know the cops are doing right now? Are they doing this and this? No, well, then suggest, then this is what they should do. Here, take that and ask them about that. And that way you might get some more action on something rather than, just waiting to find that the phone died and you're never going to get anything.
Right.
It's just unfortunate in this Woods case that it was happening in such a remote area. That's probably the biggest negative.
Well, Mark, I was surprised to learn that you are tied to Girls Gone Wild, and I'll let you explain yourself. But in all seriousness, can you talk about your involvement in that case and how and what you discovered and how you helped to resolve the issue at hand?
Yeah, the Girls Gone Wild case was interesting. That was a case I handled a long time ago, and it involved an agreement between two parties. Joe Francis was one of them. He was the one who created Girls Gone Wild. And Girls Gone Wild is this video program videos that came out years ago that was highly successful, and so this partner came to Joe Francis and pitched this idea for Girls Gone Wild, and Joe said, I don't want to do it. I don't think it makes sense. Well, Joe did it anyway, and he was making a lot of money in it.
And for the record, Dion and I have never heard about Girls.
No idea what you're
talking
about.
Yeah,
I understand. I didn't know about it either until the case came to me. So anyway. You have that deniability. You got to have the deniability. So then the partner came back to Joe and said, hey, I know you're doing this. It was my idea. And, I want some money. You're making a lot of money. He says, you're right. And he writes them, was referred to as the $1 million letter. He says, I'm going to give you $1 million. He wrote this letter and he gave him the letter. Then Joe said, no, I'm not going to give you the money now. And so the partner sued him. And then I was hired by the court, the Santa Monica case. I was hired by the court to go in and try to find the $1 million letter within Joe Francis's computer. And so I had a court order to do it. And I appeared at his office one day and announced, and I was supposed to be there. And then he wouldn't allow me to, I had an appointment, the whole thing. He wouldn't allow me to do what I needed to do. So then the attorneys get on the phone and there's a lot of yelling and screaming, and I eventually got kicked out of the office. So then you don't want to do that to the judge when they issue a court order. Not a good thing. And so then I got back in there about, I think it was a week later, made another appointment, and I was able to forensically acquire the ESI from this single computer that they had that was supposedly generating this $1 million letter. And I looked for the $1 million letter, didn't find it. But what I did find was hours before I got there, I'm talking about 4 or 5 hours before I got there, somebody was doing maintenance, and I'm doing air quotes on the maintenance on the computer. And there were about 30,000 files deleted in mass. And they used this program, which was a spoliation program, a deletion program. And I was able to show that these files were there at one point and that they were deleted and that this program deleted it. And so I testified for 4 days on this case, and he ended up losing the case, and he got sanctioned additionally, which is a punishment by the court. So it didn't work out well for him, but that was one spoliation case that I've worked on, which was resulted well for the client.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that scene in Goodfellas when the cops are coming and they take the cocaine and they're flushing it down the toilet. And, even that would leave some trace, just like in this case, there was a digital trace.
It would. And that's the thing with the digital traces, man. It's the tools that they use, and you can buy these tools, deletion tools, and get them from the internet. And they're very inexpensive, and they're very effective. What they do is they delete the file, and then they overwrite the space where the file was repeatedly. However, you can't delete all activity. And so if you suspect, as an examiner, if I suspect that there was deletion, I look for that type of activity. And if I find it, or if I found the file or a reference to a file that should be there that's not there, then I know that the file was deleted. And if I can put a date and time to it, that's even better.
So you're saying for us laymen out here that it's just as incriminating. You can't find it, but you can actually see that they went in there and somebody removed it.
Right.
And he wrote the check at the end of the day?
I don't know if he wrote the check, but the money there was a lot of money involved. Yeah.
Wow. Hey, here's another case. Can you tell us about the Michael Jace case and what you were able to determine?
Yeah, the Michael Jace case, this was, Michael Jace was an actor. He worked on the Shield TV show years ago, and it ended up being a murder at his house. And the murder was involving him and his wife, and his kids were there too. The wife came home and from taking the kids to baseball practice, and he hit the door. He was inside in the kitchen. It's a small house in the kitchen, but he was drinking all day, and he had a gun with him. And as the kids went to their room, they got in an argument in the kitchen area, and the argument turned physical. And he ended up shooting her once in the back, which was the kill shot. And she fell into the hallway, which is where the kids were. So then he said, "You like to run?" Well, and she happened to be a runner on this track club, and she'd like to run. Well, why don't you run to F in heaven? And he shot her once in the left leg and once in the right leg. Then he calls her brother and says, "I just shot April, and come get the kids." Then he calls 911 and says, "My wife was just shot. I need an ambulance." And the cops start rolling in, and that's pretty much the case. We were representing him, and I was on the defense team, and one of the objectives was, the big objective was to take it from murder 1 to murder 2. And so there was no premeditation, deliberation. It was just a straight up actions of what happened right then. And that makes it a murder 2 versus a murder 1. In looking at her phone, the IO, investigating officer, had a passcode. And she believed the passcode would work. So she enters the passcode. The passcode didn't work. She entered the passcode again, and she kept entering the passcode until the phone got locked up. When the phone is locked up, it's referred to as bricked, which means the phone is as good as a brick because you're not going to get anything out of it. We were able to, however, through some investigators up in Santa Barbara and also someone in the Central Valley, come up with an approach to unlock the phone. And what we did was they put in a new SIM card, which reset the phone to the wireless carrier. Once it got reset, then we use a tool to do what's called a brute force attack for the passcode. And that means we have a device where we put a camera over top of the phone and it runs an algorithm constantly trying to find the code. And when it finds the code, the passcode, the screen flashes. Well, you can't see it with your eye, but the computer can see it. And that's how we identify the passcode, and that's how the phone got unlocked. So that worked out there, and we're able to show some activity on her device that was good for the case. And ultimately, we got the charge. He got convicted of the lesser, which was the second degree. But when you added the gun enhancement back on, then it's back up to where it would have been with the first degree, pretty much. So,
what was you mind if I ask what the sentence was on that?
I think he got I think it's like 15. The 15 and another 10 for the gun, something like that. It added up to maybe 25, 30 years, something like that, I believe.
Wow, that's really a sad case.
Oh yeah, no, it was very sad. And one of the things, and I tell you that case haunted me for a while because, I'm looking at the decedent's phone and, this person didn't deserve this. He just didn't deserve it. And the pictures of the kids and all that stuff. And it just bothered me for a long time. And I mean, that's what happens when we work these cases. And I try not to get personally connected, and not personally connected, but emotionally connected.
But it's kind of like, how can you not? You're a human being, and it's it's just a sad. No, there's no winners, obviously.
Yeah, I mean there isn't, and it was just sad all the way around. But anyway, so that bothered me for a while. But it's just, you work on many of these cases. I've been working on just tons of cases over the years, and just that's kind of your evolution as an expert examiner, that you don't want to get emotionally connected to these cases because it'll bring you down.
A little bit of a tech turn here. You mentioned a couple of them. Can you go into a little bit more detail, or maybe just some names and kind of like an overview of what they do, of some of the other tools of the trade that you use in your work?
Yeah, one of the big packages right now that is very effective because we're dealing with mobile devices is called Cellebrite. And Cellebrite is a package that actually is created out of Israel. They've got a large organization in office in New Jersey, but it is the go-to software package for analyzing mobile devices. And mobile devices, you're talking about cell phones, tablets, and you can do drones with it. In fact, it's pretty cool with that. And it's a very effective package that analyzes mobile devices. There's also other packages that do computers. Axiom is one, Incase is another. Incase they came on the scene really early when I started back in 96, and they're not so much into it anymore. They're more into e-discovery and like early case assessment kind of stuff rather than the examinations they used to be involved in. Forensic Explorer is another one that we use, which it's very similar to the others that we use for computers themselves. And then there's a package called Intella that I like a lot for doing email examinations. It's really, really good with email. It's more of an e-discovery package, but it does a tremendous job with email in analyzing that. So yeah, those are kind of the main groups that we use, but we lean a lot right now on mobile devices and Cellebrite.
So, Mark, what does the future hold for digital forensics? You talked about a lot of the cool tools you have. What are some that are on the horizon, or where do you see this field going?
Well, I'll tell you, it's not going away. It's only going to get bigger. The amount of ESI that's available on all sorts of devices. There's a thing called IoT, Internet of Things. In our houses, we have all these Wi-Fi connected devices, maybe a toaster or a refrigerator or all sorts of different things. Well, you can get information from that, and it can be very helpful to show certain things. it's only going to get bigger. So you're seeing a growth in that area, and then you're also seeing a push of privacy. And so those two are colliding constantly. And you're trying to say, okay, well, I know this information is there. Is there expectation of privacy? There is. But is there a way that we can get it without violating that? Or is the court going to give us, or just say, yeah, it's okay to get this because of this type of case? So it's only going to get bigger. You're going to see more of it in vehicles. It's just growing. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I've been riding this wave since '96. I can continue to ride it to the end. I don't think that it's not going away. Plus,
no, I agree, and I want to ask you kind of a little bit of a cheeky follow-up question on that. So as this continues to grow, and you see when you go to buy, anywhere from, like you just mentioned, a stove, a dishwasher, refrigerator, they're all digital, they're all Bluetooth, they're all Wi-Fi in there. So at some point in time, could your toaster or your refrigerator pin a crime on you?
Good question.
Possibly. If there was a usage event maybe on the device, and you were the only one that's supposed to be in the location, and there was a usage event on the device, but you said you weren't there and you weren't doing anything, and all of a sudden you're able to access that information and says, yeah, well, the toaster was working, so you had to be there.
So you inadvertently you could kind of frame yourself, because if you said, hey, I was at home, and then someone says, what were you doing? Well, I was making breakfast and I had a piece of toast, and then a guy like you comes in and then looks for that data. Well, the toaster wasn't used, you know what I mean? Or vice versa.
That's certainly one. Another that I just thought about, Dion, was these deep fake images that 60 Minutes did something about 3 or 4 weeks ago on deep fake and what you can do. And so what they're doing is they're taking images of celebrities or famous people and digitizing their face, getting some audio and letting them say what you want them to say, but they actually didn't say it. And so that's a very easy way for us to do a examination on that. Is you always go back to the original item of evidence. So what was the original recording? The original recording would have metadata associated with dates and times. If those dates and times match up to the modified dates and times, when you think somebody changed something, then you got them. That's the way that you would show that it's a fake. However, there's ways now that you can modify the metadata. And so it always comes back to what's the original device that this was created on. We need to get the original. I don't want a copy. I want the original. And once you get back to the original, and then you can make the acquire that original file, then you can say that this was the original and the chain of custody is not broken and it's authenticated. Otherwise, you just don't know. And for social media or the press to put out something like, it really happens more in social media, I would imagine, but to put out a recording of somebody it's really not them saying it. I mean, there could be political, gigantic implications if somebody says something in a recording that is not true, and it could be really bad. So I see that as a burgeoning problem that's going to only get worse.
To kind of take this a little bit forward, let's say people are listening to this, or they're maybe see it on a campus, if they want to get into your line of work. Let's say, for example, like myself, I'm so excited about this, and I want to get into the world of digital forensics, and I want to become an expert. And I'm sure you get this question a lot. What advice would you give them preparing for their career?
I think that it's a great area to be in. You can do very, very well. You can make as much money as a lawyer makes per hour easily. I mean, from a private side, we charge $400 an hour, and there's other experts that actually charge a little bit more than me, but you get our expertise when you do that. The getting into this business, I just fell into it. And I've kind of been riding this wave. Certainly I've had training along the way as things advance. You can get into this pretty easily. Now, certain types of software is pretty expensive, like the Cellebrite package that I mentioned. That's $12,000 just for the software, and it's $6,000 a year.
Oh,
maintenance.
So you better be committed to this career path. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. But you can do very well in analyzing these mobile devices, and you can make a lot of money doing that. And getting the training, the InCase is guidance software is right in Pasadena. There's other schools now that are doing training people to be forensic examiners. You have to have an investigative mindset, though. You just can't be just a straight IT guy. Well, I think I'm going to try to figure this out and then go that direction. It just doesn't work. You got to have an investigative mindset to do it and have an interest in moving ahead, like in this certain areas. Some people don't like the criminal area. I kind of grew up in the criminal business, and I love working in the criminal area because well, first of all, we're the ones who create these different procedures because it's always going back and forth. Who's trying to do more? The prosecution or the defense trying to come up with different solutions to do things. We're the ones who develop this. Then the civil side picks that up, and that's how they do it. It gets adapted to them, but that's much slower. So we're right at the forefront of creating this information, and I mean it really helps. If you ultimately, I love to help people. That's what I like to do, and in everything that I've ever done, it's always about helping people. There's always a thread that's running through there, and so that's why I like doing this. And if that's what you like to do and help solve problems, you can get into this business, and it's fairly easy to do it. Just get some training and buy the software, and you can call yourself an examiner. Now you got to have experience, and the way that I recommend getting experience is to associate yourself with someone who's highly experienced, or go to some law enforcement agency and volunteer there as a reserve, volunteer to assist them on certain things if you have that technical capability. And you'll get the experience, but experience is really, really important.
So clearly with that hourly rate, I've made a poor choice in my career decision. And I was wondering if you're taking on any interns so I can gain that experience.
Yeah. I don't know about that poor choice, Dion. I have to look at your resume.
Hey, I want to sneak in this question. I should have asked earlier. Is there anything digitally untraceable? Like you hear something like a WhatsApp, and there was another app that came out even earlier that was like Snapchat or a ghost app or something like that. So is there anything where Mark just taps out and says, I can't do anything for you?
Yeah. Well, if you're talking about those specific communication apps, you're right in some ways and wrong in another. It is encrypted in its device to device transmission. So nobody's going to be able to intercept that and get it. Okay, that's not going to happen. However, if you can get to that original device or the receiving device, then you've got the information. It's still there. They could delete it, and you may not be able to recover it if it's overwritten, but you may have a remnant that you could find. If you could find that it was there at one point because you see the file name or maybe a portion of the picture that you could recover, but you don't have anything else, you can say that it was there at one point and it's not there now. Depending on the type of case you have, that may be helpful to show that they were intentionally deleting things if it's a civil case, and it would cost them more money, potentially in a spoliation punishment type of sanction. Or if it's a criminal, it may go towards a state of mind or intent that they intentionally wanted to do this, and because they did it, they deleted this information. So how about that?
Okay, so I want to make sure your answer doesn't get lost. So you're saying, like on the WhatsApp, that phone to phone, because it's encrypted, it can't be grabbed. But if you have the phone, you can grab that information.
Right. The wireless the communication between the devices is encrypted.
Okay.
And on the WhatsApp, everything is it's sitting on the phone. It's there.
Okay.
And this thing was a Snapchat. Snapchat has the idea that these pictures are not recoverable because they delete after 24 hours, I think is what it is. Yeah, they're recoverable, and I've got them. So if you can get to the actual device, yeah, you can get it.
Well, Mark, we really, really appreciate your time today. I know we kept you a little bit longer than we said we would, but we appreciate the lesson, and I think it's going to be so helpful to all of our listeners. And, just keep up the good work, man, and best of luck with all your endeavors.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, fellas. It was nice talking to you. Happy holidays. And if you need me in the future, give me a call.
Well, Dion, I'm now scared to death to use any of my electronic devices. I don't want to use my phone, my computer. I'm not even sure I want to use my refrigerator.
I'm scared of my toaster at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, those are some great points you brought up, though, right? I mean, everything is Bluetooth.
You have to be aware of it.
The Wi-Fi. So, like I said, you have to assume now, directly, indirectly, that you're under surveillance 24/7.
Yeah. So the flip side of that, of course, is, well, some would say, well, geez, if you're not committing a crime, you don't need to worry about that. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, this geofencing stuff sounds a little scary to me.
That's 1984. That's
it is. It's pushing the limits of privacy, and I suppose it's a necessary evil. And there's always this balancing act.
No, I agree. It's definitely Orwellian, and I know there's some some benefits to it, mostly marketing, but when that stuff gets in the wrong hands, it's usually not a good thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's definitely some tension between a thorough crime investigation and not overstepping,
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it is a society, it's like, you're going to have to give something up to live in a safe society. That's just the bottom freaking line.
That's exactly right. And I'm also usually not so concerned about criminals' rights being violated if they're truly a criminal. But the more I work with you, the more I realize that law enforcement doesn't always get it right, especially in this case involving a ever-changing landscape of digital forensics.
Yeah, and I think you hit it on the wording is people want to say, well, what do we care about a criminal's rights? But they're a defendant, right? We're trying to determine whether or not they're criminals.
They are a criminal,
until
right?
That time they're a defendant. So the privacy does make a difference. And, we hit on this a lot with Mark, but the similarities between digital forensics and DNA. And I think there's definitely a parallel between this geofencing, where you're starting out as a broad dragnet and focusing in to genetic genealogy. It's kind of the same idea. You're not starting out with a specific target. You're trying to look at that universe of targets and then focus it in. And then another DNA parallel that jumped out to me, Dion, was when Mark was talking about how they have a regional forensics lab in Orange County. And, that like this Cellebrite equipment and software is super expensive. So he was saying how they kind of have a Cellebrite kiosk there where law enforcement can kind of stroll up to it. And it's like a communal piece of property, I guess.
Which is crazy in itself, right?
Yeah. So it's DIY. And Mark was saying, well, that could work, but there's different types of things that you're looking at, and you need to know that. And I was thinking of the parallel of rapid DNA. And I think we may have touched on this in a past episode, but basically there are now tabletop devices where you can stick in a DNA swab from someone's mouth, and 90 minutes later, you have a DNA profile. And the whole idea of this is that you don't have to have a crime lab for every little piece of DNA that you're going to analyze. And so ultimately what happens is there's people with much less training than a criminalist running these machines. And for some applications, that's probably fine. But if you start getting tricky data, if you start having problems with the instruments, there has to be somebody at the other end interpreting that. So I just thought that was kind of a parallel to this DIY Cellebrite thing that Mark was talking about.
No, I see a lot of similarities between the digital forensics and DNA, and especially in the training where the training has to get caught up to the technology, and in there's a lot of mistakes that can be made in the early adoption of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like medicine. I mean, there's somebody who, well, I might be speaking out of school here, but I think there's somebody who probably takes an X-ray, but then there's somebody who has to interpret that X-ray.
Right. Our timing couldn't have been better bringing Mark on, because as we're in the course of scheduling him, the news of the Alec Baldwin case had been kind of, heating up.
Right.
And with our newfound knowledge about digital forensics and the terminology that goes with it, I wanted to read a bit from the actual affidavit, David, for the search warrant for Alec Baldwin's phone. So here's just a portion of the language of the search warrant. So number one, the cellular phone for Alec Baldwin. Number two, a forensic download of the cellular phone to include digital images, digital movies, emails, social network accounts, social network private messages, deleted digital messages, deleted digital movies, evidence of multiple or deleted social network accounts, internet browser histories, phone book, stored contacts, network connection logs, text messages that include both MMS and SMS, to include aftermarket text applications, phone use timelines, event logs, database cache histories, image cache histories, passwords or documents containing possible passwords, access to any cloud devices or drives, which also contain digital images or digital movies or documents containing passwords. First, it's scary that all of this is on your phone. It's basically your life right there.
Yeah, and the description of your life actually in this document goes on and on and on. I mean, there are more things that
that's right. This is just a portion.
Yeah, no, we just wanted to give you a flavor.
Yeah.
But it points out that precision and language in criminal investigations, particularly those that are involving technology, are critical. And I just go back to that example Mark gave where, one side in the dispute said, hey, there's a cell tower ping that's kind of putting this guy in the area. And Mark said, well, that's half the story. Yeah, there was a ping, but it was in the wrong direction and it was at a different time. So, again, paralleling it with DNA, I was just thinking of a case where maybe we have a murder weapon, say a gun, and it's swabbed and defendant's DNA is on it. And prosecutor says, aha, defendant's DNA on the murder weapon doesn't get any better than that.
Right.
But then you start looking at it, well, geez, that gun was collected 3 weeks after the murder. And yeah, there's DNA from the defendant on there, but there's also DNA from, 3 other people. And maybe on top of that, the cartridge, the fired cartridge cases at the scene were tested, and that's an entirely different person. So there's some significance that the defendant is on the gun, but look in the bigger picture, what does it really mean for the case?
Right. You know what? We wanted to say, we hope that our Crime Redefined fans, we hope you learned a lot and enjoyed this episode. And I mean, call us crime nerds. I know I did. I really learned a lot. Some of it was frightening, but there was a lot of great information out there. And like I said, we hope you really enjoyed it. And don't forget to check us out on our new platform, Verbal. We're very excited to partner with them as true crime ambassadors. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And please interact with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And actually YouTube as well, our YouTube channel. We've really gotten some great feedback and some insightful questions from our listeners. So we do really appreciate that.
I just wanted to add real quick, Verbal, that's actually spelled VURBL.
Right. Thanks. That's a good point. And then be careful what you post because Mark will use it and track you down.
Yeah. So don't talk too much crap about it. We got Mark. He's on our side.
Yes. Only positive.
No, just kidding. Please be forthright.
Yeah, be honest, but try to keep it positive. So we really want to say, hey, thanks. As always, we truly appreciate the worldwide support that Crime Redefined has enjoyed, and take care to all of our listeners.
Thank you for listening to the Crime Redefined podcast. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Crime Redefined. Please send us your comments and questions and join us for the next episode.